Hello, I'm Caroline Coram and this is the Boom Review. What if I told you that we have been in a war? Underneath our feet, a world war has been raging, not for 5 years, but for hundreds of years, hidden in the labyrinth of fault lines and fissures, tunnels and mines. The wars in Ukraine and Gaza are only 1% of the tip of the iceberg. A carefully coded trail of messages has been left for us to find when the time was right. That time is now. The science has always encouraged those seeking a career in science to choose a specialism. They can either be an eye surgeon or a foot surgeon. They can either be a microbiologist or a physicist. They can either be a nuclear scientist or a virologist. It is rare that anyone is allowed to step outside of their field. Nobody is allowed to be a polymath. But why? Because if they were allowed to step outside of their little niche, they might start to join dots from different niches together. Dots that those who invented the science don't want them to join. They might realise that what they thought were perfectly normal infections and diseases were not normal at all. So not normal, they are literally inorganic. The spider's web of the science is so intricately woven, but at the same time deeply fractured. It is a monumental task to unpick it all and piece it back together. Not only have the scientists been well and truly misled, but so have we. Our blind faith in the science is actually a symptom of the continuous stream of physical attacks on us. We want to think outside the box, but for most of us it has been physically impossible. A brief disclaimer. I am not a medical doctor and this article does not constitute medical advice. It is for entertainment purposes only. Please speak to your qualified doctor or consultant if you need medical advice. When COVID struck in 2020, flu bizarrely disappeared. Everyone who was sick now had COVID, even if they had cancer, a heart attack, or had a car crash. Even if they died of something that they had had already for 10 years, it was still marked down as COVID. It didn't make any sense at all. Was it just another game scientists and authorities were playing with everyone? Where had flu gone? What was COVID? And what was flu? As flu quietly resurfaced in 2021, nobody really talked much about it, other than a raised eyebrow or two. Many chalked COVID down to just being a case of the flu. Our research group were busy elsewhere trying to establish what was causing the frequently awful air quality. Over 4 years, we constructed a list of components we could confirm were part of the sky war. These included global weather modification, arsine gas, lightning storms and lightning radiation, dry ice seeding, fog, mist and haze with particles, sulfur dioxide clouds. But still some of the pieces didn't fully fit. What were all the air quality markers about? PM10 and PM2.5 particle measurements going up and down like a yo-yo, along with nitrogen dioxide and carbon monoxide. The air quality was visibly very poor when these markers were elevated, but it couldn't be gas or the transient fog, so what was it? One day I was checking what element in high amounts could trigger premature birth. It was calcium. This was the piece of the puzzle that would unlock the labyrinth. You may have noticed, if you have been coughing recently, that there has been a strange, almost chalky taste in your mouth. That is because there was calcium carbonate in the recent waves of fog. This is the main component of blackboard chalk. Calcium carbonate put into food products mixes in our stomachs with hydrochloric acid and is turned into a calcium ion. That means it becomes a free metal, unbound, pinging around with a high charge. In high amounts, together with arsenic, it can cause chaos. There is a lot of calcium in the British diet, from the 455 milligrams per 100 grams of wheat flour to literally anything with flour in, and lots of things that don't even have flour in: our dairy produce, the feed that cows eat, and the lime that is put on the fields. The list is endless. We have estimated that the average adult British person consumes anywhere from 1 to 4 grams of calcium metal willingly each day. Then there is the nano-sized calcium added to the air, perhaps another half a gram or so breathed straight into the lungs along with arsine gas. Why is this such an issue? Arsine gas converts to arsenic in the body. One of its many talents is sticking to all the calcium channels. These are the channels that regulate how much calcium can go in and out of our guts, lungs, and cells in general. Arsenic holds the channels open, and 1 to 4.5-ish grams of calcium enters freely into the bloodstream daily. Some people have so much calcium overload they can literally feel an electrical charge buzzing through their bodies. They can find it really difficult to sleep, relax their muscles, control their thoughts, and even simply to stay calm. The calcium overload is creating a coursing river of energy in the body that is difficult to switch off. Some people seem to become magnetic and get electric shocks from everything. There are high readings of other metals from hair tests we have seen that may also contribute to this charge. These include, but are not limited to, magnesium, manganese, uranium, barium, chromium, lithium, and arsenic. You can read and hear more about our findings on calcium from the Spaces and specific articles here on the Substack. Measures were stepped up in September this year across Europe against African swine fever. Normally it is swine flu, but this time it was specifically from Africa. Almost all influenza A strains are listed on a taxonomy browser that I've included in the article. They all have states or countries of origin where a particular strain was first identified. But if you scroll down the lists, you will see many entries, for example, for Minnesota, Florida, Connecticut, and other states in 2017. In Beijing, there are multiple entries for strains of influenza in 2009 and 2014. Were there really that many different strains of flu in one year, or did these codes have some other purpose? If flu is inorganic in nature, as we suspect, could these locations be something to do with the underground war? Recently, bird flu has created great concern, particularly in the United States. A state of emergency against H5N1 bird flu has been declared in California. Cases of bird flu have also spread to humans there, according to the Pirbright Institute, and to cattle herds, which is unusual, as a paper called Influenza A in Bovine Species and Narrative Literature Review points out. Instead of bird flu in the UK this year, alongside the threat of African swine fever, we have bovine tuberculosis, blue tongue in various locations, including the Isle of Wight, and a single case of atypical bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which is BSE to most of us. And this was recently confirmed in Scotland. It is curious how cows don't get cow flu. It is as if they are exempt. Instead, they become suddenly dramatically unwell and are sometimes culled as a result. The last cases of bird flu in wild birds in the UK were in April 2024. The strain was HPAI H5N1. HPAI means highly pathogenic avian influenza. The abbreviation HPA also stands for hectopascal, which is a measurement of air pressure. Air pressure, we recently discovered, can really affect our health. Arsenic holds the calcium channels open, low air pressure sucks metal and fluids into the cells, Then high pressure pushes it all out again, causing illness. Could this be how some strains of flu are created? Let's get back to the animals in question. If I line up a chicken, a pig and a cow alongside each other, the chicken is smallest, the pig next, and the cow is the largest. The cow has many more cells than the chicken, and the pig somewhere in between. If a measured amount of metal, for example, is put into the air, more chicken cells are going to be affected than cow cells, simply because there are fewer of the chicken cells to contaminate with the same amount of metal. If the metal is in toxic quantities to a chicken, they will get visibly sick. If more is added, then the pigs will also get sick. Finally, if a lot more is added, then the cows get sick. Using this very basic model, by the time cows have blue tongue, BSE and TB, things must be really pretty bad, and more than likely, humans will have already been affected at some point in between the chickens and the cows. But what if the use of animals in naming strains of virus is also a sort of code? Bird flu in wild birds could mean that there are metals, gas and lightning in the sky. Bird flu affecting barn chickens could mean there is so much in the air that it is penetrating buildings. Swine flu could mean there are toxic substances coming up from underground. Pigs root around in mud, after all. Maybe when cows get sick, there are toxins both in the air and underground. So what is flu? We're told that viruses take over the machinery of cells and replicate to spread further around the body, but at the same time that they are not living organisms. In a bizarre article from the Scientific American in 2008, the author, Luis Villarreal, says, open quotes, viruses, though not fully alive, may be thought of as being more than inert matter. They verge on life, close quotations. What on earth does that mean? Something is either alive or not alive, surely. Not some fuzzy halfway between, unless what they mean is that all life is made up of chemical components that interact with each other. Perhaps the virus has the means to alter those chemical components in the same way a poison would. We think viruses develop when there are enough toxic components present to overwhelm the body and show visible illness. This does not mean that there are no toxins in a body that isn't visibly sick, just that there is not enough for the body to show signs of distress. More of one toxin and less of another could create different effects, leading to different types of illness, disease, or virus. So to the arsenal of weaponry being used against us, we can now add calcium and other metals in the air and in the food chain, to arsen gas, lightning storm radiation, particulate fog, and bacteria. We have also discovered that metal particles exposed to lightning radiation can be irradiated, so we can add radioactive particles to that list as well, as if there wasn't enough already. A little lightning radiation and some radioactive particles don't seem quite enough, however, to create the severe and sometimes deadly cases of flu or COVID. There has to be a missing piece. Influenza has a long history spanning millennia. However, an unusual febrile flu broke out in 1780. Until that point, the illness did not include fever. Something had changed. The 1780 febrile flu spread from China through Russia to Europe and then America. 30,000 people a day were said to have died in St. Petersburg. Official records claim a Prussian scientist, Martin Klaproth, discovered uranium in 1789, but it is possible this date has been concocted. In volume 33 of the Bulletin of the History of Chemistry from 2008, Alexander Kraft writes about the history of a compound known as Prussian blue, that is ferric hexacyanoferrate 2. It was invented somewhere between 1705 and 1706. Johann Conrad Dippel, a German physician and chemist, paid a very brief 2-year visit to a Berlin laboratory, which was in Prussia. He was reported by George Ernest Stahl some years later, 1731, to have invented Prussian blue by accident when trying to make a red pigment in the same laboratory as Diesbach. The German natural scientist Johann Leonhard Frisch, or Diesbach, claimed in letters to Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz that he was the real inventor of Prussian blue, and that in 1715 he was still the only person who knew how to make it. He sold 100 pounds of it for 30 thalers per pound in Paris in 1714. In 1714, a very lucrative business. It is still unclear who actually made the compound and whether it really was an accident. Prussian blue was not only used in paintings but also as a dye in the Prussian military uniform of the 18th century. What is truly remarkable about this supposedly accidental compound was that a British scientist later discovered it could bind and remove radioactive cesium in the gut. One of the uranium decay chains involves the decay of uranium-235 into cesium-137. Ironically, after being lauded as the first synthetic colour to be created, Prussian blue was soon found to be very unstable, fading quickly in the light or when mixed with other pigments. Yet the inventor and others who acquired the secret formula continued to sell quite a lot of it, even to Japan. So a German scientist, whichever it was of the two, had supposedly discovered, either accidentally or on purpose, an antidote to radioactive cesium poisoning, 83 years before uranium was discovered. Is it possible that radiation seeping out from explosions in mines and fissures containing uranium was involved in the 1780 outbreak of febrile flu in China, which then spread across to the West? If that was the case, was it accidental or deliberate? As Prussia and Japan bought significant amounts of Prussian blue, they may provide a good starting point for an investigation. So what are the symptoms of flu versus radiation sickness? The symptoms of flu are listed on the NHS website, that's the British healthcare website, as follows: a sudden high temperature, an aching body, feeling tired or exhausted, a dry cough, sore throat, headache, difficulty sleeping, loss of appetite, diarrhea or tummy pain, feeling sick and being sick. The symptoms of radiation sickness, according to Mayo Clinic, are nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, headache, fever, dizziness and disorientation, weakness and fatigue, hair loss, bloody vomit and stools from internal bleeding, infections, low blood pressure. There are slight differences in the lists, but if you look on any search engine, you will find, for example, that during radiotherapy to the lungs, coughing is common, as is insomnia, and not all people exposed to radiation develop bloody vomit or stools. Also, during bouts of flu, hair loss can occur. Hair loss has been a well-documented feature of COVID also. Low blood pressure and high blood pressure can be present in both flu and radiation poisoning depending on the stage and depending on when the blood pressure is taken. Radiation sickness looks and sounds quite a lot like flu and vice versa. The most common form of flu today is influenza A. This is usually written with an H followed by a number and an N followed by another number. The H stands for hemagglutinin and is graded from H1. Heme means blood and agglutinin means an agent that sticks together. Hemagglutinin are any naturally occurring compounds that stick blood cells to each other, forming tiny or much bigger clots. Hemagglutinin is present in blue tongue virus, sticking red blood cells together in sheep, chickens, guinea pigs, cows and mice. It has been found also in measles virus, Norwalk virus, HIV, hepatitis, and so on. According to the effects of ionizing radiation on blood and blood components by the International Atomic Energy Agency, radiation causes red blood cells to stick together, partly due to the presence of disulfide bonds on their surfaces. clotting and hemorrhage can both be symptoms of acute radiation syndrome. From our research, arsenic is attracted to these disulfide bonds and may increase the stickiness of the blood cells. Many of the hemagglutinin proteins listed on Uniprot are full of disulfide bonds. There is, for example, an entry of Irish duck hemagglutinin from an influenza virus in 1983 and another one from Leningrad H2N2 virus in 1957, both full of disulfide bonds. Calcium is also a key player in the formation of blood clots. So all three components, arsenic, calcium and radiation, can be implicated in clotting. The N stands for neuraminidase and is graded from N1 to N9. The ending A's tells us that this compound is an enzyme, or at least acts like one. Enzymes are catalysts for biochemical reactions. In other words, they cause chemical reactions in the body, often breaking things down into smaller pieces. Neuraminidase is said to break off acetylneuraminic acid from the surface of cells. Acetylneuraminic acid is a type of sugar in the sialic acid group, which protects cells from chemicals and radiation. But because it is a negatively charged molecule, it is vulnerable when there are high levels of free positively charged metals floating around, such as calcium ions. In a paper linked in the article, calcium was found to amplify the bystander effect of ionizing radiation to other cells. So cells are more vulnerable to radiation if their calcium content is high. And phosphate-rich energy molecule, ATP, is able to protect surrounding cells from the spread of radiation. And that is because phosphate can bind calcium ions. Neuraminidase, the N part of the flu virus, also binds to calcium. In another paper, it is said to help bind free energy, which might be a description we would give a radioactive particle. Another paper written in 2020 says that the calcium channel and calcium ions are essential for virus entry in all virus infections. Another paper explains how arsenic affects the calcium channels, leading to gene damage, DNA, and cell death. So together, high calcium and the presence of arsenic make it more likely for ionizing radiation to spread to other cells. Is this really what flu is, and how it spreads, with the help of calcium and other positively charged metals? And lastly, what if the H and N of the influenza virus codes had an alternative meaning, a chemical one? What if H actually meant hydrogen and N meant nitrogen? It was a long shot, but worth a try to see if there was a way to firm up the theory about radiation and metal poisoning being flu. The database called PubChem lists thousands of chemical compounds, from simple atoms to highly complex structures. Many of the strain codes did indeed have a hydrogen and nitrogen compound match, particularly the most common strains of flu such as H1N1, H3N2 and H5N1. They were all either simple ammonia molecules, large complexes with a base of ammonia, or small ammonia-derived particles. 222 is the PubChem identification number for ammonia. In letters, that is BBB. BBB stands for blood-brain barrier. It also stands for build back better. Ammonia is used in the manufacture of fertilizer and is a byproduct of the production of nuclear energy. In fact, a substantial amount of investment is now going into the production of green ammonia using nuclear energy. According to Herbert Grace Crabtree in a paper written in 1936, ammonia compounds can form in irradiated tissues of organisms, including animals and humans. Mount Sinai lists the following as symptoms of ammonia exposure: cough, chest pain, chest tightness, difficulty breathing, rapid breathing, wheezing, fever, tearing and burning of eyes, temporary blindness, throat pain, mouth pain, lip swelling, rapid weak pulse, collapse and shock, confusion, difficulty walking, dizziness, lack of coordination, restlessness, stupor, bluish-coloured lips and fingernails, severe stomach pain, vomiting. These symptoms, together with the symptoms of influenza and radiation poisoning, complete the picture of what we have been experiencing over the last 4 to 5 years. There is a lot of work still to be done, but we can say with conviction that radiation and accompanying metals have been used and are still being used against humanity. It has been kept hidden in the most insidious of ways. We are just at the beginning of this discovery, and more answers are on their way. All critical information posts and articles like this are free to read, but we do need your help to keep this research going, to reach more people with sky and earth alerts, health findings, and cutting-edge research. You can make a one-off contribution or buy a coffee regularly, or even get access to all the research on the Boom Review on Substack as a full member. Thank you to those who have already supported us and to those who will join them as supporters. We cannot do this without you. Lastly, I want to say thank you to all of the people who have helped over the last 4 years of dedicated research. From the beginnings of the Boom Review with Loretta and Elaine, reviewing the science with Sebastian Powell, and the hidden history with Karen H. We are now on an accelerated history, science and health pathway with the formidable Boom Review team, Nicole, Annette, Captain Kronos, Lisa and Wendy. Thank you to everyone on our channels, particularly Lindsay, Calamity Jane, Welsh, Brian A, and others on the Sky and Earth Anomalies team, and everyone supporting from near and far on all of our social media channels. Thank you. Till next time.